Yo, yo, yo. This is candibknittin. I'm Candy B. I'm B Knittin. And today I thought I would talk about what I have cast on recently. So, y'all know I love Stephen West. And there is a belief amongst fans of Stephen West that everything he does is just amazing and great, which is true. But I thought I would share with you, and this is all going to come full circle, trust. I do have one Stephen West pattern I am not a fan of. Like if I were to list, or if I were to have listed the Stephen West shawls I want to knit in priority order, the one that would have come in last is a little shawl by the name of Vertices Unite. Not a big fan. Incredibly popular, and just for reference sake, I have my Westness Best Knits here. And I'm just gonna cover it up so y'all don't see the instructions. But in case y'all don't know, it's the modular shawl that has all the different blocks, and you knit these parallelograms and you pick up stitches, and there's some striping and some solid blocks, and I'm just not wild about it. And I think it might be maybe seeing people's color choices and the modular nature of it. Two things happen. One, depending on the placement of the colors, my eyes can play tricks on me, and sometimes these different kind of blocks kind of pop out differently to me. And then I believe it's also the way certain people block the shawl, because you're picking up stitches. And so like sometimes there's like an angular situation where it's supposed to be kind of like, or at least I prefer a more traditionally shaped triangle shawl. And so sometimes it can be a little lumpy bumpy. But it's one of those patterns I keep seeing and people keep knitting, to the point where Stephen West has recently did like an update to the pattern, and now it's got more clear instructions. He's released new videos on his YouTube. There's a mini version of the shawl that now comes in the digital version of the pattern. Obviously my book has not been updated. And I see this shawl all the time, and people talk about how fun it is to knit, how much they love it. And I'm just like, But in the back of my mind, I keep thinking about this shawl. Like there's a million other shawls I can knit, and nobody is telling me, Candy B, you must knit this shawl. But and in my back of my head, I was like, well, I just don't, no. And I'm just like, it's one of those maybe hate, or rather, yeah, hate isn't the opposite of love. It's indifference. And it's like, I keep thinking about this shawl, even though I claim to not like it. I claim to not care about it. But it's like living rent-free in my brain for some reason. There has to be something there. And so this week, someone I follow on Instagram, they were talking about a shawl knit along that's coming up, and they were like, well, what shawl should I knit? And Vertices Unite was on their list. And I was like, oh, you should knit I was like, all of a sudden this shawl comes back. I'm like, well, I don't really care. But then this person that I like and respect on Instagram is like thinking about knitting it. And I'm like, let me actually look at this pattern again. Let me see what it's about. And so I'm finding myself in maybe a enemies to lovers type situation with this shawl. And so I actually read the pattern, looked at it in the book, and I think part of it is, as garish as some of Stephen West's color choices can be, seeing it in the book with the almost like monochromatic colors kind of like spoke to me. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And so I spent a little bit of time looking at it, and I'm just like, and y'all know I've been looking for something to really capture my imagination. I've been in a bit of a rut. One of my goals is to knit more shawls this year, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna go for it. I think I'm gonna cast on the Vertices Unite. And one of my favorite things to do when there's a pattern that I can't quite wrap my brain around, I like to try to pair it with a yarn that I can't quite wrap my brain around. And so y'all might remember at the beginning of this year, I talked about my goals for this year. And one of my goals is to use up, let me see if I can, this yarn. And this yarn is a single ply yarn I got from Scrap Baltimore. It's a craft thrift store in Baltimore, Maryland. I got it when I went to Maryland Sheep and Wool 2 years ago. And let me see, the yarn is actually called, the brand is Yarn Rehab, which not really wild about that name. They also go by Meadowcroft, and the base is called Moon Lure, and they still dye yarn, but I believe this base has been discontinued. And the thing that's throwing me for a loop is when I bought these, I was just like, oh wow, 3 fingering weight yarns, that's my favorite way of yarn, all the same base from the same dyer. I can make something from this. But what's thrown me for a loop with these is I don't really feel like all 3 of these necessarily go together in something. And like the red is super duper bright. I feel like the blue and purple kind of go together, but then the purple and the red, I'm not crazy about those together. The blue and red, you could kind of make those work together, and I just could not figure out how to make these work in a project. And so I was just like, okay, I got this pattern that's kind of tickles my brain. I got this yarn that's tickling my brain. And last year, I actually ended up making the doodler out of a yarn that I was not wild about. I ended up gifting that to somebody, and so I was just like, but it made me fall in love with the doodler pattern, and so I was just like, maybe a yarn that I'm not wild about with a pattern that I'm not wild about, that might be a recipe for something special, especially if I feel like I have like literally nothing to lose, right? And so I was just like, all right, the pattern calls for 5 different colors, so obviously I only have 3 here, and I don't have enough yarn. I'm making the large version. Y'all didn't have to add. There's a small version and a large version in the Stephen West pattern. I'm making the large version, of course. So I do not have enough yarn here, and I don't have enough colors. And so I was just like, well, let me go into my stash and look at all of my other single ply yarn. And the thing with single ply yarn, and so that's why I've been having issues with this yarn, is not only the colors are kind of weird, or I can't make them go together in my brain at least, but single ply yarn, you know, people say, oh, it's a bit weaker, it wears a little bit more, and so you don't really want to put it in like a sweater where you're going to have a lot of abrasion, or socks, for instance. And so a shawl is, you know, a lighter wearing garment. I'm not going to be like, you know, climbing mountains in my shawl or anything like that. The other thing, this is also a superwash yarn, and so it's just like, okay, it's single ply, but it's also superwash, and so superwash has the reputation that it tends to grow when it blocks, and so that's doubly the reason I would not want to necessarily a garment out of this. But for a shawl, if my large Stephen West shawl becomes an extra large Stephen West shawl, that is all to the good. But so let me show you, and I'm going to start with the non-contenders. And so I started off the shawl with this. I caked it up and everything. This is Black Smoke Fibers. It's a nylon single base, and I actually have 2 of these, and so I was like, this can be my 4th and 5th color, because my issue with the Vertices Unite is that I feel like it can be a little bit much with too many different colors, and so I was like, maybe if I make 2 colors the same, it'll be more harmonious. And so I started with this. I literally started the shawl yesterday with this yarn, and I had to do a little bit of finagling with the pattern to make it make sense, because it's, you know, you have 5 colors and there's 6 sections, and there's sections where colors are matching up with each other. So if you have 2 colors that are the same, obviously that's going to throw off your situation. And so I started it yesterday, but in the back of my mind, I was just like, I was thinking of all the single ply yarn I own. I was like, I actually have some single ply yarn that I spun. And I was just like, I don't know, because it's going to be uneven, or there's going to be super, super thin spots, and it's not going to hold up. And so I kind of was like, be quiet, just use this yarn, then you can use these 2 together, da da da. And then I was looking at the pattern and how I laid out the colors, and I was just like, I was doing a lot of mental gymnastics to make 4 colors work with a 5-color shawl with 6 different sections. And I was just like, I kind of feel like if I'm gonna really commit to this and commit to the process in the way that the pattern was intended, and to really figure out if I like this pattern or not, I do want to do it in 5 colors. The issue is the only other single ply yarn I have is this yarn, which is Woolen. What is it? What is this called? Woolen Boon. I always want to say Woolen Bullen every time I see this yarn. It's Woolen Boon, who does not dye yarn anymore. And this is actually yarn. The first winter that I knit, Mr. Rulud and I went on a anniversary trip down to Virginia Beach. And I bought this in Virginia Beach at a local yarn store called the Yarn Club. And so this was like my first like LYS yarn. And I knew nothing about LYS yarn. And so, yeah, this is the Skinny Single by Woolen Boon in Summer Vibes. And the problem that I think this was on clearance. It was probably on clearance if I bought it. And I picked up 2 and they were the same exact color. I was so excited because I was like, oh, I have enough, I have 2 skeins of this yarn and they're both on clearance. It turned out this is a single and the other one is just like a fingering weight, like 4-ply, 8-ply fingering weight yarn. And so they're not the same base, but they're the same color. And so I've had this kind of sitting around like, what am I going to do with this? The issue comes in, they're both in the green family. And I really wanted to dedicate myself to doing 5 different colors. And if I'm looking at my palette so far, what I'm really thinking is going to bring this whole thing together, thumbnail, is yellow. And that brings me back to my handspun. The other thing with this, let me go back to this yarn really quick, is because I have 2 skeins of this, I feel like I can, like a lot of Stephen West shawls call for 4 skeins, 2 in one color, 2 in another color, and I feel like I can use this for a different shawl because I don't want to have, like I know I'm probably going to have a lot of this yarn left over, and so I really want to put this in a shawl where it'll be kind of like the star of the show. That's the other thought there. So I was laying in bed last night and I was like, I'll just look at that handspun tomorrow morning and see what it's giving, because it might be suitable, it might be similar, maybe. And I literally, first thing I do, I pop out of bed. I'm an early riser, I'm a morning person, and I'm like, let me go into my office, open up the skeins right on top of my bin of handspun, and to quote It's a Sarah, heart jumping. I picked up the skein and I was like, this is literally perfect. And so this is my yellow. And this is Polworth. And that's the other thought too. It's like, oh, I'm using all this superwash nylon stuff. This is 100% non-superwash Polworth. This is, oh my goodness, Neighborhood Fiber Co. Polworth and their Cobblestone base. This is a DC based dyer. All their stuff is named after DC stuff. And I look at this yarn, and this is my handspun. This is the yarn Rehab yarn, and I'm gonna say that that's a pretty, yeah. It was heart jumping. I was just like, yeah, this is it. The only issue with that is I had this one skein, or this one braid that I did a 1-ply with, and I was just like, man, I got this one thing of yellow, and this is months ago. I ended up going, this is another anniversary trip. Last year I was in Maryland, and I forget the name of the yarn store in Maryland, not in DC, where I picked this up. And this is Passion Knits yarn on their spellbound based. The colorway is yellow, superwash merino wool, And so I had bought this to go with this, and I was like, well, now I had thoughts of using this somehow together. I'm gonna break up the band. Next thing you know, I'm literally pulling out every single tonal primary color yarn I have in my stash, and I was just like, bruh, you're spiraling. You wanted to use this. This was your first thought. Yes, it is Polworth. You're using my super, blah, 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 blah. You're going to analysis paralysis yourself into a situation. Do the thing that you wanted to do. So long story short, this is my Vertices United shawl. I guess this could be another thumbnail. I don't know. And so these are my 5 colors. I think they're great. The next issue is how to lay out the colors, because like I said, there's 6 sections. There's certain colors I think really go together really well. So very, very long story short, I started off with this and this together. Frog that, because I'm not using that anymore. Then I was just like, well, now I've brought yellow to the party. Let's start off with this and this. Love these 2 together. But as I was knitting it, I was like, I love these 2 together, but let me look at the pattern again. And at some point, Stephen West explained how to pick colors for this shawl, but I can't find where, because this was probably when I literally first learned to knit. I heard about this shawl, and Stephen West was talking about, oh, it's like these colors A and B are going to the movies or something. I don't know. But I was just like, I like this yellow and blue together. I like how this is starting, but I need to think about the big picture. And that's hard to do when you're casting on a massive shawl that's going to be all modular. And so I spent some time really looking at the picture and where all the coloring is. And I noticed that the highest contrast areas are actually these little wings there. So I think the yellow would go best in this area. And this is section 1 where we're starting with that blue. And I just, for some reason, I don't know if you have weird rules when it comes to colors. Your science notebook was green in high school. But for some reason, blue has to be color A for me. So I'm just like, okay, blue is my color A. Let me start from there. And then the other big question is that E block, which when I was saying how, sometimes I can have dimensional, I guess, depth perception issues, because that color, that block, or section 3, rather, that's in color. Oh, God. Section 3 is in color E. And it's one solid block of one color. So then I have to think about what color do I want one solid block of. And I'm just like, and I don't want to use my hand spun as that, because I want it to hold it with something else that's going to give it a little bit more stability and even out some of the gauge. And I'm just like, let me fully embrace the strangeness of this shawl. And so my color E is going to be red. And so I'm going to have a big, huge red block. And so talk about dimensional issues. It's going to be great. I'm fully embracing the terror. The other thing is, this is going to be, I've been pretty chilly in the house lately. And the other night I was like, I don't have my hoodie. Where's my hoodie? I need my sweatshirt. And I was like, I have all of these shawls. Let me put on a shawl. And so I've really been loving wearing my, my Night Nook shawl, but that's like a cotton acrylic blend. And so it's not super warm. And so I'm hoping having a nice, an even bigger wool shawl will just be chef's kiss. I know I said I needed a cardigan, but I'm like, I think I just need to embrace the shawls. I enjoy knitting shawls. Probably should start wearing the shawls that I've knit. So that's a little bit of insight into my mental space and how I plan for projects, or lack thereof of planning for projects. Let me just show y'all where I'm at this far. This is my 4th time starting this, and I think I've committed to this. I'm going to do the blue and the green together as color A and B. And this is where I'm at so far, and I'm really enjoying it. This is exactly what I needed as far as the perfect project goes. It's funny, I've been knitting, this is my third year going into knitting, and I'm like, if I compare and contrast, like for instance, this first section, you do a 4-row repeat with increases intermittently. And when traditionally, I am a tally mark person, and I am like, you're supposed to do, I think it's a 4-row repeat, and you do the 4-row repeat like 80 some, 90 some odd times. And I would do tally marks traditionally for each one of those rows, and then do tally marks for each of the repeats. And now I'm at a point with which there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you got to do, because I lived it. But I cast this on and I read the repeats, and I was just like, oh, I know exactly what to do. And like, so I've been able to memorize this first part, which has made this much more pleasant, especially as I've had to start it over 4 or 5 times. So I've actually memorized the beginning of the shawl too. And it's pretty cool to, see the progress. And also, if I am now so comfortable with knitting, I can say, oh, if my stitch count's off, because like you get to a certain number of stitches. Like if somehow I'm off, or I'm like not on the right row or whatever, it's fine. It's a shawl. I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? Like I used to be very much like, oh, I gotta rip the whole thing out and start over. There's one stitch off, which is another reason I greatly admire Stephen West. Say yes, don't stress. So I started this. This is on size 4 red lace chow goose. I'm really enjoying it. I've been watching TV and just, I guess you could call it swatching, because, I ripped out everything. And so I just been seeing what colors go together. I also tried the blue and the purple together and quickly realized I always put blue and purple together. And so I was like, I'm not going to start off with that. I'm going to do something a little bit different. And so exactly what I needed for the exact headspace I'm in. I took all my other whips, bagged them up, I just was like, I'm in charge. I'm the boss of me. I'm going to take all these whips that I'm not feeling right now. I'm just going to put them in a corner somewhere and start something totally new. And because this is my hobby and this is fun. So that's that. Very, very quickly, because I am reaching the time that I set out for this. I showed y'all this last week. This is my Highland worsted with knitting for olive mohair. My antler toque, I am still working on this, but this is probably gonna get kind of a backseat because I'm really into the shawl and I'm just now getting into the cabling part. And so this is probably going to go to the side until, actually, maybe, no, scratch that. I think I'm going to take this to work with me. And then on my lunch break, I can put all the stitch markers in for my cable repeats and kind of get it set up. I think this is going to be my work project. Finished Mr. Rulude's socks, and so I need it. And I'm kind of, we're in February 17th today. Wednesday was Valentine's Day, and so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, that's all I did was try to finish his socks for his Valentine's Day gift. So I've earned a break, and I'm gonna probably in March start the next pair of socks for him. And so this might become my lunch break project. The other thing, I went to a birthday party with one of my children today, and I needed, like I said, I'm done with the socks. Didn't necessarily want to bring a cabled hat to a child's birthday party, but I am an introvert parent, and so I'm bringing my knitting. And so this is some of that hand spun you might remember. This is Gotland drum carded with some Coopworth, and I just started off stockinette. And what I'm going to do is when I get to, because I cast on just what felt right for the gauge and the thickness of the yarn, and these are size 6 needles, so I cast on 96 stitches because it's divisible by 4, and that's how I like to do my decreases. And once I get to a certain length, I'm just going to fold this stockinette over, knit the stockinette brim together, and then I'm going to go into my coffee dyed yarn and some just plain Gotland. And so I'll go more into detail on this the further I get into this project, but I literally just needed something And this is what I got done in the hour and a half that I was at the birthday party. I'm gonna leave it there. Please tell me what you're working on. What have you cast on lately? Is there a pattern that you're not super wild about, but somehow you just can't look away from it? Like you're just like, it's Cher by the fountain, and she realizes like, oh wow, he's been there all along, let me know. Once again, this is candibknittin. I'm Candy B. I be knittin'. I'm candibknittin@gmail.com. I'm also at Rulude on the Instagrams. Until next time, peace.